industry. I am T Dizzle with
And
my other host,
I'm Impad.
and we are live for the first time. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm so excited about this, and also
Yes.
have no idea what I'm doing. So we will see.
Yeah, we'll figure it out along the
But
way.
it does say that we are live right now. It does say that, so
It
at least we
does.
know that's working. How was your weekend? So I saw in passing, but I never actually clicked it open. And then when I went back to look for it, I have no idea where you sent it. But I saw you message me and said that you were deep in the Appalachian Mountains, I think you said,
Yeah.
which is such a wild place to be. How
It
was your
is.
weekend?
Um, it was a trip. That's where my dad's family is, and they are deep in there. Um, yeah, it was
Hinted
a
us.
good trip.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Black
I don't know.
people in the Appalachian Mountains is, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, yeah, and there's quite a few of them out there.
Yeah.
Just so interesting because I'm sure, like, have you ever been someplace and it just hasn't aged at all? And like,
That's what I was wondering. I was wondering where are they mentally, politically, socially? Like what is
yeah,
that like? Would it feel like you were going back in time?
yeah, for sure. So it's like interesting because when you're driving through the mountains, you kind of drive through like little pockets of towns. And
Mhm.
where my family is, like there are a few, Trump 2024 flags, Confederate flags. But I remember driving through one town and I was kind of like, this is kind of scary. Cuz it was just very like almost children of the corn type. And then throughout the town, there were these signs everywhere that said Knox Creek shall be saved with a giant red cross through it. And I was like, I don't like
Creepy.
that. Yeah, yeah. Don't want anything, I don't want to stop here. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
then um yeah, I saw like Let's Go Brandon flags, and I just think when I see that in poor towns, I'm like, do you really think like Donald Trump cares about you?
They don't
Like I
care.
I promise you he doesn't even know this place exists, to be quite
First of
honest.
all. First of all. Because I didn't know that place exists and I actually research things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what was like even more wild, and it sounds so funny saying it out loud, and I promise I'm not making it up. So, when I was down there, unfortunately, my cousin got locked up. So, I had to go bail her out at like 9 o'clock at night.
Boo.
Yeah, whatever. So, none of the adults, like other adults, go with me to go pick her up. Now, granted, I know the town, but I don't know where the fuck the jail is to go pick her up by myself, right? Also, it's dark,
Now,
so
is this a cousin who came with you or a cousin who lives in the town?
a cousin who lives in the town.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
And nobody who lives in the town would go with you?
yeah. They were like, "Oh, Mariah's got it. Like, she'll be fine." And to be
Wow.
quite
That's
honest,
interesting.
a
Mhm.
lot of them had been drinking. So, to be quite
Okay.
honest, they probably shouldn't have gone.
Fair.
Who knows if they would have made it worse or better because they were
Fair.
drinking.
Fair.
Um, so I like called the jail and was like, "Hey, I'm from out of town. Could you tell me like your physical address so I can type it into my GPS? And
Mhm.
the guy was like, well, where are you coming from? And I was like, I'm in Welch. And he goes, okay, well, what are you by? And I was like, I'm by a bank. And he goes, which one? And in my head, I'm just thinking, like, why
Do
can't
you
you
not have
just
a
give me
physical
the address?
address? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, yeah, he like didn't give me the physical address. So once we got off the phone, I like Googled Welch Holding Center and like got the address that way. Have you ever seen the movie Silent Hill?
I have not, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, so you could
Scary.
look up like the aesthetic of that, and that's kind of how like Welch is in the nighttime. Because I was
I s-
literally driving up an alleyway. There's no like lights or anything, and it's up this hill. And I like called again because I was like, hey, I think I'm on the right street, but like I'm not seeing you. And he's like, oh, you passed us. I saw a car go by. And I was like, where would he have saw me when I didn't even see the building? And yeah, it was like fucking tucked away behind a wall, barely any lights, no signs or anything. It was just insane. But
I just
got
I
her
just
out.
looked up the aesthetic. It looks terrifying.
Yeah, yeah.
It
If
looks
you Google
terrifying.
if you Google Welch, West Virginia, there's like
West
those
Virginia.
overview, yeah, those overview photos that pop up, and like the very first one, you'll it should be like all these houses and buildings like within a hill, and like tell me that doesn't look like the aesthetic of Silent
Oh hell no. So how did your white mom, meet this black guy from the Appalachian Mountains?
Yeah.
How? How?
So, I don't
With
think
this with
I
this
don't
aesthetic.
yeah. So at the time, well, like late 80s, I believe, and early 90s, Welch was actually like a thriving little coal mining town. So, and I want to say that's when my grandma and all of them first moved down there. And so when they first moved, it wasn't what it is today. Like there were businesses, there were, a bunch of families that lived out there. But then, once the coal mining shut down, it just, that whole town kind of fell apart. And when my dad and mom met, he was actually living like more in the city, I believe. I don't think he was living out in the Appalachie, but my parents met at a gas station.
Yeah.
So,
He was a gas station guy. Hey,
no,
Shorty.
they were like both just happened to be at the gas station and I guess thought each other were cute. And my dad was like, oh, well, we're going to a party. Do you want to come? And my mom was like, yeah.
That's what I meant by gas station guy. You know when you go to the gas station
Oh,
and for
yeah,
me
yeah,
you go to the gas station, like literally I just want to pump some gas and like get something to drink and be on my merry way, and there's always some dude that like, hey
yeah,
girl, and you like, I got a man. Well, your man don't let you have friends, baby. Look.
right, right. I hope my dad's flirting was a little better than that, but it was the 90s, but anything could
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So,
Yeah,
if you're new to Black Behind
absolutely.
the Chair, we are two hairstylists who happen to be Black. We work in salons full time. Well, Raya's full time. I'm really more like part time. Behind the chair as hairstylists, and we talk about things that we talk about behind the chair, things that we don't talk about behind the chair, because both of us have a mixed race client base, and so there's some things, at least for me, that I don't necessarily have the mental bandwidth for when I'm behind the chair. Um, Raya's a lot more spicy than me when it comes to that. I'm old and I'm tired and I just want you to get your fucking hair done and go. So the last time we met, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that we talked about in depth was, of course, the Kendrick Lamar versus Drake beef. And I
Yes.
wanted to circle back to that because um, I was doing some research because, we had discussed all of the allegations against Drake, which have been floating for years. So
Mhm.
it's not like Kendrick was really saying anything new, but it was just very poignant because now the entire country, the entire world is singing about Drake being a pedophile, PDF file.
Right.
um, And so we kind of were discussing like Kendrick Lamar and allegations that Drake had made about Kendrick Lamar and misogyny and Kendrick pulling Dr. Dre on stage and all of those things. It's
Right.
not posted, so if you missed it, you just missed it. You're bad. But we'll be going live going forward, so you guys will be able to get those shows going forward. But I wanted to revisit that because I did an internet deep dive
Mhm.
and I legit could find zero things about Kendrick Lamar beating his wife. And that's not to say that it's not true, but that is to say that if I were a PDF file who had just had these allegations come out against me, it just does not beyond the pale for me that Drake just made something up out of the clear blue sky.
Sure.
Um, and especially given that the Not Like Us video dropped over the 4th of July weekend, which I found
Mhm.
hilarious because,
Mhm.
of course, there was the pop out on Juneteenth.
Yep.
And then on the 4th of July now, the video has dropped, which he's just reinforcing, the colonizer piece. So I thought that
Mhm.
was hilarious. Um, yeah. So did you watch the video?
I haven't seen the full video yet. I did see like the main clips though.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
saw like Whitney in her wife beater,
Mhm.
like dancing. Yeah. I was the
Mhm.
It's like
Yes.
epic levels of trolling happening here at this point.
For sure. For sure.
And then the video or the pictures came from old white guy's white party where Drake decided to wear cream, which is weird because now you just look dirty amongst
Yeah.
all this white. But he looks
Right.
like he's aged like 20 years.
Drake.
Yes.
I
Have you seen his
haven't
face? Like,
I haven't
what?
seen him recently. Let me look him up.
So it reminds me, like, what Drake looks like today reminds me of when Obama won the presidency. And he was like young and vibrant and like handsome. And by the
Yes.
time he left the presidency, he still was handsome, but he definitely had got his ass kicked while he was in office, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And so he had
Oh
aged quite a
yeah,
bit. So
he does look older.
he just doesn't look like he's sleeping. Like he looks
Mhm.
rough. What do they say? Rode hard and put away wet. And he was at the white party, so that might be true. Like if we're keeping it a
Right,
buck.
right. I've just never like I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up with Aubrey Graham being on Degrassi. So
Hmm.
I just find it so funny that like Jimmy from Degrassi has quote unquote like taken over
Yeah.
the music industry like he has.
Well,
And I'm
they're saying that he should get an Oscar because of the role he's played at rapper is like his best role yet, and that he's just killing
yeah,
it.
for
And I
sure.
think that's valid critique.
Yeah,
Because to
100%.
try to act like Drake has not impacted hip hop would be disingenuous. He has. As
Yeah,
someone who I am turning 50 this year, hip hop turned 50 last year. So I literally grew up with hip hop music at the same time, right?
right.
Um, and so I think it's disingenuous to say that Drake has not impacted hip hop culture at all. That's a lie.
Mhm.
And also, he does approach hip hop like a white person would approach it. He does approach it in a very not in tune with the culture. Like he approaches it like an old rich white man and not
Mhm.
like someone who grew up with hip hop. You know what I'm
Abs
saying?
Yep.
And I think that's why Not Like Us has resonated so much
Yeah. I feel
because
like we kind of talked about that too with like Kevin Hart in a way, like not to take any way from like, if Drake or Kevin Hart struggled, but it's also like you're not you didn't struggle the way that you're like coming off the way that you struggled.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So what are you talking about or not talking about behind the chair since I talked to you last?
Yeah. Um definitely talked about the debates.
Oh, girl.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um yeah, so talking about, you know, uh Donald Trump and Biden's first presidential debate, which, kind of leading into the Supreme Court ruling. And then with that, like I've just been, because I would say predominantly, if not all of my guests are probably more Democratic, like liberal leaning. And I've been trying to like tell these like older Democrats, I know Ruth Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? Is that her name?
Mhm.
Like I know
Mhm.
she did a lot of good, for America and just, being a woman in the Supreme Court. But like she also kind of fucked us over.
Yeah.
And I don't get what it is about Democrats to where why can't we hold these people accountable? Like why can't we, look at RGB or RBG Joe Biden and say like, yeah, you've done pretty good, but maybe now it's time like go to bed. Like put on your slippers, get into your
Yeah.
pajamas and just go to
Yeah.
sleep. Like,
Like, aren't you? Yeah. Agreed. I think for me, you know, I told you my mom was threatening to, well, I don't think it was a threat. I think it was a promise. I think she meant it. But she was basically saying that if I didn't vote for Joe Biden, like not to come for Thanksgiving dinner, right? Um, but my view is like the Republicans and the Democrats are two wings, same plane kind of a
yeah.
thing. That
Mhm.
this government was not set up for poor people in general and Black people specifically. And that the entire goal of the system is to survive. So, like in the case, and we've talked about this before, of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, um, I'm and I just saw something the other day that asked if Black women and white women can be best friends, and we should probably touch back on that. But
Mm.
I think that white women are always going to white women. At the end of the day, like you are a woman, yes, and you can be women's rights and all of these things, but at the end of the day, these are your sons that are doing these things to this country. And who raised these boys? Intimate, you know what I mean? So I think when white women at the end of the day are always going to support white supremacy, which is why so many white women voted for Donald Trump in the last election, which is why,
53%
as much good
be
as she
exact.
did, she couldn't bring herself to do all of the good because then that was going to benefit other than white people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think go ahead.
I was just like thinking, I forget which woman it is. I think it might be Susan B. Anthony. I don't know.
Mhm.
One of those white women that was very like, um, one of the reasons why we got like the women's suffrage and like women's rights
Mhm.
and all that stuff. But she was like a big racist too. Like she hated black people. And I just, not to say that like Ruth Bader Ginsburg hated black people,
Mhm.
but how does it look that she didn't want to let the first black president, you
Mhm.
know, appoint someone into the Supreme Court because she wanted to wait for quote unquote the first female president? But it's like, mm, but
So it was never about the good of the country because you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Who's to say that you're even going to survive till the first woman president gets here?
well, and that's what I said too. I was like, she knew that she was sick.
Mhm.
Why did she wait?
Mhm. And
That's
my
what I
answer to that would be that white women are going to white women at the end of the day. They
Yeah.
can't help it. They can't help it. They just
Well,
can't help
like,
it.
why can't they hold themselves accountable? Why, like, they got to take it to the grave, and it's like, you fuck us over more by doing that than if you were to just let go of your pride and be like, you know what? I've been in
Ego.
office for 60 years. Like, maybe I call it done.
Yeah. Not to mention, I think in 60 years, so much changed in 60 years that was good. But, we've talked about this before, but I'm turning 50 this year. And so, what I know for sure is that as much as I like to be forward thinking, and I'm definitely here for the kids to take the reins and like just to be like a source of wisdom of things past for the next generation.
Right.
Um, that as you age, also you get stuck in your ways, right? So like,
Mhm.
yeah, 60 years it's been a good run, but baby, you were still alive during segregation. So there's going to be things that you were exposed to that what do they call them? Hidden biases, like all of these things that you unknowingly are doing. Baby, sit down and pass the reins to the next generation and be a source of wisdom. Like, this is what it was like when I was young, but I understand that things need to progress.
Yeah,
And the
right.
fact that you chose not to do that says more about you to me than anything that you had done prior to
Agreed.
that.
Agreed.
Wild. When I was watching, I turned on the presidential debates just because I really need Joe Biden to say something to make me feel enthusiastic about going to the polls in November because I'm not currently. And if I'm being 100% honest, 2025 aside, I am still undecided about this election.
Mhm.
Mainly, I think the thing that's mainly holding me back about Joe Biden is his stance on Palestine. And but the thing, so I turned it on, and about 5 minutes in, I was already over it. Like it was a snooze fest. But at some point, I was like sitting there playing Yahtzee on my phone, watching the debate. But I happened to look up, and the two of them were legit arguing about golf. And I
Yeah.
said to myself, if this is not the whitest, most privileged, like thing I have ever seen in my entire life, that's disgusting.
It's
Like people can
literally
literally, we are out here trying, we're literally fighting for our lives, and y'all are on stage arguing about golf. Like you're beefing over golf during a presidential debate. I was disgusted.
yeah. I have no words. Like both of them, and like what was awful was the fact that like yes, Trump pretty much didn't say anything truthful, but like could he form a full fucking sentence and like if you didn't know that he was lying, he probably did sound factual. To whereas like Biden couldn't even form a fucking sentence.
No,
And
he
like
definitely looked like he needed a nap.
what does that look like? Like if I
Yeah,
wasn't someone who's educated and like knew, I would probably want to vote for Trump just based off of
yeah,
that.
yeah. I
Like
saw
we're gonna
on, yeah. No, I saw someone on Twitter who said that she was a nurse who takes care of like dementia patients and Alzheimer's patients. And she said that it looks like Biden was sundowning, which
Hmm,
is basically where like dementia patients do well during the day, but as you get later into the day, that they start to be a little more disoriented, a little more like just not with it. And that made a lot of sense to me when I saw it. You know, I'm no nurse, I'm a hairstylist.
right.
But I did kind of look up sundowning and do some research, and I'm like, that tracks.
I did hear, I wonder if that's what the term was called. I read something and they were like, yeah, if you catch Biden between like I think it was like 9 and 4. He's pretty
Mm-hmm.
good. Like he can
Mm-hmm.
talk, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you catch him when he's been traveling or like
Mm-hmm.
anything kind of outside of that 9 to 4 time
Yeah.
frame,
Yeah.
it's not the same.
Yep.
And I was just asking like one of my guests, I was like, what do you think like his wife is saying to him? Like imagine your man being up there on national television and like that's what he's talking about.
Embarrassing.
Embarrassing. And you're just
Embarrassing.
like, yeah, honey, I'm going to support you. No. And especially because now there's talk that, he should drop out. Like, are you telling him maybe he should drop out? Or are you saying, like, oh, babe, you can stick it out and fight it because you're
Yeah.
strong?
Hey, I don't know what she's telling him, but honestly, I don't think that it's up to either one of them. I've always felt like the president was selected, not elected. And I'm not sure that it's up to them. So now they're having these discussions about if Biden steps aside, which the news says he's adamantly against. But again, I don't think it's up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Then who's going to take his place? And so I found it interesting that the names that were floating around like early last week did not include the vice president. And I am not a fan of Kamala Harris, um, mainly because she was a cop prior to, you know, and I'm not a fan of cops.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I found it interesting that her name was not initially in the conversation. It seems to be, though, that I've been seeing her name floating around more recently.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts around whether he should step aside? Who should take his place if he steps aside?
Yeah, I was asking that too because I was like, okay, if he does step down, does that mean Kamala does take over? And then I was like, okay, let's say she takes over. Does she pick the new like cabinet, or is she sticking with Biden's cabinet? And yeah, I'm also not like a huge fan of Kamala either, but I'm kind of like I would rather, I don't know, would I rather have someone that's 30 years younger or however old she is, and also a woman and
Hmm.
a woman of color?
Brown woman at that, even though,
Yeah,
like, find sometimes it's
yeah,
hard to know. Yeah. I would definitely be much more, as much as I don't care for her, I would be much more enthusiastic about voting if it were her
yeah, yeah,
versus
for
Joe
sure.
Biden. And I don't even care for her. But
Mhm.
I would vote Democrat. I would be willing to commit to voting Democratic if it were her and not Joe Biden, for sure.
Yeah, because I feel like to me, that would at least show that maybe the Democrats are open to being more progressive. I feel like if,
Absolutely.
if Democrats allow Biden to literally be the Democratic nominee for 2024, it's going to ruin. I really think we are on the edge of seeing democracy fall.
Hmm.
And this
Hmm.
election is really gonna be the tipping point.
Yeah. I don't even think we're on the edge. I think like the rocks have already started. Like it's started.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
started. It's just that we're
mhm,
in the center of it, so we don't see it. I think if
yeah,
we lived somewhere else in the world, it would be a lot more easy to see from afar. But I think
mhm.
it started, and so I know that for me, my strategy is going to be to get the hell out of the way and just let them eat themselves. Because what's happening has nothing to do with black and brown people. This is some shit. This is some hundreds of years worth of white supremacy fighting amongst itself. It has nothing to do with us except that they need somebody to do the physical labor of it all, in my opinion.
Right, right.
So, yeah. Crazy. It's bananas to me that we like, and I just keep trying to decide like what is the end game. Rents are high, food is high, like everything is high as hell, but people's wages are staying the same. And that's clearly not sustainable. Like, what is the point? What do they think is like, what's the end game?
To get
What
rid
do they
of the
think is
middle
going to
class
happen?
completely.
Yeah. Okay. And then what? Like, okay.
Well, I feel like I don't know. I sometimes I feel like I get a little too conspiracy when I think too much about society and stuff. Cause I don't know if you've ever saw like any of the Purge movies.
No, but I mean,
um,
I understand the gist of it.
concept. So the first Purge movie, you know, you don't get like the whole society of it because you're just kind of following like one family. Um,
Okay.
and then I think it was Purge election year because that came out around like the 2016 election.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
um, you find out, spoiler alert, that the people that created the purge essentially were white Christian, like, fucking nationalists,
Of
essentially,
course they were.
that
Yeah.
um were essentially trying to get rid of the middle class, and creating the purge was supposed to like be a cleansing for America. Um and I just can't think, or I think about that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
you and I are both fortunate enough to where, like, yeah, we don't make a lot of money, but we're also not living on the streets. We have a
Mhm.
roof over our head, we have food
Mm.
in our bellies, all that stuff. And I do think, like, if we're struggling, right, and we do kind of well for ourselves, like,
Mm.
imagine the people who don't have jobs, who are sleeping like in the streets, who don't have a home. And I think, like, who's watching them? And I've seen articles in smaller towns with like homeless people, and sometimes it will say that, like, homeless people have just disappeared, and it's like, well, where are they? What's going on?
Yeah.
And I can't even remember like what town it was, but um yeah, they were saying that, like, they noticed that 10 people that they used to see all the time on the streets were just no longer there. And that's not to
Wow.
say that, maybe by some miracle those home unhoused people got out of their situation, but I think these were people that had been on the streets for years. And I've even talked to unhoused people before, and there are some people that are more comfortable with living on the streets than, working and having a house. And, that's their own prerogative. So it's
Sure.
interesting when people like that just are no longer around.
Sure. Sure. Yeah,
So,
so I mean, so we're so let's go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. So we get rid of the middle class, and then what? We're putting homeless people in like camps, or just taking them somewhere and just disposing of them. Okay. And then what? Like, are we going back to slavery? Because yeah, like, are we going back to slavery? Like, what's the end game? What are we trying to accomplish
so unfortunately, I think we're too poor to even fathom what they could come up with, right? Like,
here?
I I don't know. We probably won't ever have billions of dollars, so I can't even
Yeah.
fathom, like, what would be the point to have all that money, and other than, I don't know, greed.
Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, you need a working class, right? Because
Mhm.
who's going to do the labor? And
Yeah.
so if the working class is all either dead or in jail, like, I'm just trying to understand, like, how does this, because I know for me, what I know for a fact is that I'm not going to survive. I'm not. Well, none of us is going to survive, right? Like, all of us is going to die at some point. But
Right.
like we talked about briefly before, like, you will kill me before I do much for a billionaire on purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just not that attached to being in this plane of existence, that I'm gonna just do anything to survive. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I think it seems to me like suicide rates are at the highest they've ever been, like, in history. I don't know how you say that word on the internet without getting dinged, but
Mhm.
unaliving rates. Like people are not thrilled to be here. You know what I'm saying? So like I just don't understand I just don't understand where they're trying to go. And you're right, maybe I'm just too broke to understand, but what I know for sure is that I don't remember who said it, but I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. That is
Yeah,
word.
100. Well,
Word.
and now, like, I keep seeing those memes being shared, like, learning about Anne Frank. I always thought, like, how did someone like Hitler like rise to power like that? And it's like we are
Mhm.
seeing it
We're
firsthand.
watching it in real time. Absolutely.
And I've seen some people say like, "Oh, we should be scared about fascism." Like, babes, fascism is already here.
Mhm.
Like, it's
No
it's here.
facts.
It's been here for a long time now. And with Trump running again in 2024, and with the Supreme Court ruling that he pretty much doesn't have to be held accountable for the crimes that he's committed, like, what did we think was going to happen? Like, this man, since the day he's been on TV, has told you pretty much that nothing bad was going to happen. Remember when he did an interview and said he could go stand out in the middle of the street and shoot somebody? Like, and people would still fucking vote for him. Like, we're witnessing this in real time.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
get so frustrated with, again, white people that are like, we can't survive another 4 years of Trump. And it's like, babes, where have you been? Like, yeah, we know that. We know that. We've been saying that.
And I just
And
feel like whenever, especially white women say that, I'm just like, well, first of all, who did you vote for?
mhm,
And
mhm,
second of all, I don't feel like the we and we can't survive doesn't include me. You're not talking about me.
right,
Because if you were talking about me, he would not have been president in the first place. So like I
exactly.
just question your intention behind that.
Absolutely. Well, and then I get mad too when, again, white women are like, well, this is going to be attack on our reproductive rights. It's like, yeah, what did you think was going to happen? Also,
And
it's so interesting now that now you want to care about reproductive rights because now it can affect you. You didn't care when it was women down at the borders being sterilized by
mhm,
people that weren't even licensed doctors. But
mhm.
now, because, Trump is going after reproductive rights, now it's a problem. Like, miss me with
Or
all the
Ethiopian
bullshit,
Jews
please.
at
I
the
literally, I
Israel
can't.
border
I can't.
who were also sterilized by people who weren't doctors. And honestly, I think that the whole fight for reproductive rights has absolutely nothing to do with black and brown people and more to do with white women. They want white women to have babies
Mhm,
because they're quickly becoming the minority. They're already the minority in the world, but they're
mhm,
becoming the minority in this country. And so I think that they want to force white women to have babies and that they have something different planned for us because they
mhm.
don't want us continuing to have babies.
Right.
Um,
Well, and if I remember correctly, when Planned Parenthood was first established, it was for
mhm.
sterilization of
Come on, Margaret
Black
Singer.
and indigenous women.
Mhm. It was
So,
about sterilization of black and
yeah,
brown people so that
right.
white I mean, it's at the end of the day, the answer is always for me, I can only speak for myself. Um, every time I dig into the ills of this country, the answer is always going to be white supremacy. And how do we solve that? And it's not our problem to solve. So that's even more frustrating because it's not a
Mhm.
problem that we created. So I don't feel it's my problem to solve. But clearly, white people are not going to solve the problem of white supremacy. And so here we are.
Here we are,
Here we
just
are.
trying to take it day by
Good
day.
time. I know that we're winding down, and I forgot to bring it up, but it connects to everything we've been talking about. So we're going to go back to the beginning when we were talking about West Virginia, and then connect that to what we're talking about now, and that I'm curious if the end point is Black people back in slavery, and talk about that white couple in West Virginia who was just caught keeping Black children as slaves. Did you see that?
I did not. What town was it?
I don't know the name of the town, but what I do know is last time I checked, there was no record of adoption. So it's this white couple. They had multiple children who were adopted, some Black, some white. But there were definitely Black children that were being kept in um, basically a shed in the backyard that was locked from the outside.
Hmm.
Um, and the children were kept as slaves. I'm going to,
Yeah, Kanawha County. Yikes.
and there's no, like I said, last time I looked, now I haven't looked in about a week, so I don't know if it's been updated, but last time that I looked, there was no record of these children being adopted. So, A, who are these children and where did they come from?
Mhm.
B, is this like have they just like discovered someone who is a part of human trafficking? And B, since this happened like kind of between Juneteenth and the 4th of July, I've always said, and I think we've talked about it on previous episodes about that show that Janelle Monáe starred in called Antebellum, where there
Mm,
were like, actual still plantations in America where there were, well, this was a little different because people were being um, kidnapped and taken to these plantations to work as slaves, and they were free. So they knew that they were free when they got there. But I
right.
would almost bet money that there are still places in America where there are Black people in slavery who do not know that they're free. I would bet money. And it's
Absolutely.
stories like this one. You said you found the article. What was the couple's name?
Um, Wit something, White Feather and Lance kept.
Oh, Jeanne Whitefeather and Donald Lance.
Yes.
62 and 63 years old in West Virginia.
Mhm.
Accused of adopting Black children and forcing them to work as slaves. And I know that they were arrested and then they like, I want to say they posted bond really quickly. So then the judge went back and actually raised their bond because, like, based on how they were living, like, how did you even come up with that money that quickly? So it seems like
Yeah.
something much deeper is going on. So I feel like I want to keep my eye on that story because I feel like we may have stumbled upon like some child trafficking. I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to keep my eye on that story and keep us updated.
Well, and I did see a video circulating, was it down in Atlanta maybe? There was like a guy following like a U-Haul truck, and a
Yes.
little part of it was like open and you could see a hand, and he like
Yes.
called the authorities, and yeah, it was like a human trafficking situation.
Well,
And
so the police came question the driver and then let them go because it was just a family traveling. Like they didn't have any reason to like suspect that there was anything wrong. So, yeah. And Atlanta is like really there's a lot of human trafficking in Atlanta. It's one of the human trafficking capitals of the United States.
We
But
up here in St. Louis, we have the one of the main highways.
mhm.
I think it's Highway 70, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
We too. Look at us.
I know, right?
I hate that.
I know. What else? Do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on that we weren't able to touch on or didn't touch on?
Um, let's see. I want to say that was kind of it that I had.
Um, I always have like such a long list, but we're like coming around the bend, so I never want to go over and take up too much of people's times, but I'll give people some things to just like look up for later, just to kind of
Yeah.
stay up to date for what's happening around us. So, Patrick Braxton, um, he was the first black mayor in elected in a town called New Bern, Alabama. So he got elected, and then basically, like all of the white people who controlled that office prior to him, basically like locked him out, and he had to sue for to be able to get in and do his job that the people elected him to do. So if I'm not mistaken, he just finally won.
Oh, good.
Um, and is being able to like go in and do his job. We'll see. But I would definitely keep an eye on Alabama for that. So again, his name is Patrick Braxton. Um, and then there was the LA County Sheriff or the Louisiana County Sheriff Deputy Jonathan Stewart, who died of a meth overdose while on duty. Did you see that?
No. No.
And I have always said that when officers are involved in like, if you shoot anyone, let alone kill them, that they should be drug tested on the scene. I've always said that.
Absolutely. It's
I've
crazy
always
that
said
they're
that.
not
In
because if
any
it were
other job, if I break my toe at work and miss work, well, not me because I'm self-employed, but like if I were employed by someone and I hurt
yeah,
myself at work or someone else, I would be drug tested.
yep.
And if I smoked weed, let alone meth, I would be fired.
Hello.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
do
so
you
that's
remember
Jonathan.
we had a case up here where the what was it, like 3 or 4 officers were doing coke and playing fucking Russian roulette?
Yeah,
Like,
allegedly, because wasn't it a black officer that was shot?
yes, I
Yeah.
believe
So
so.
I think allegedly, because I always thought that was fishy. And then I don't remember if it was Darren Wilson. I don't think it was Darren Wilson. It was someone else. Because, you know, St. Louis has one of the most corrupt police departments I've ever seen. But
We
it was
do.
someone else who was on trial for killing someone who I think was acquitted, but then later was like coming home at like, as like, it was early in the morning and he like hit several parked cars, I think in his police cruiser, and then left. It was like hit and run. It was in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I
What
think he
was
wasn't
that?
drug tested right away, but then they drug tested him later and he still had cocaine in his system. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I'm looking up.
I'm like, I don't
And
remember who it was, but
he like hit other cars, right?
Yes, and then left the scene. Yep, and went home. And I wanna say he was caught because it was, like, caught on people's Ring cams or something.
I believe you're right. Let's see here. Um, I wonder if it was it the cop that killed Vonderit Myers?
What's his name? I feel like I would know it if I heard it.
Let's see. Uh, yes, this is him, but what's his name?
Because that was shady. I feel like I
Yeah,
was in St. Louis when they killed Vonderit Myers. I was in St. Louis protesting the murder of Mike Brown. And we talked about how the 10-year anniversary of that is coming up here in roughly 32 days. Um, Not that we're counting or anything. But I
right.
think the murder of Vonderit Myers happened while I was in St. Louis protesting the killing of Mike Brown.
Yes, Vonderit happened, I want to say October or November of 2014. Jason
So
Flannery.
I think that's him. I think that's him. Yep,
Yes.
I think that's him. I remember that name for sure. I'm pretty sure that's him. Ugh, disgusting.
Yes, and he like resigned after, yep, resigns after
He's
being accused.
probably working in another police station somewhere where he's already won like cop of the year or some other bullshit.
Probably.
All right. Well, we gave the people something to think about, definitely something to talk about. Again, we are Black Behind the Chair. We're two Black hairstylists talking about things that we talk about and things that we don't talk about when we're behind the chair. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So you can leave those in the comments. Make sure you like and share the video. And MPAT is going to see us out.
That's a wrap, but the movement marches on. Black Behind the Chair isn't just a show, it's a statement. We're IMPAD and
T Dizzle.
challenging you to be your most authentic, unfiltered self, born both in the salon and beyond. Keep shaking the table and breaking the mold. Until next time, power to the curl.
Cheers.
Ears.